lashing out at the U.S., cozying up to Russia tonight as he attempts to cling to power in Venezuela. This after opposition leader Juan Guaido swore himself in and was backed by the rest of the free world as that country's rightful leader, following massive protests in the streets of Caracas. Now, to be clear, Maduro stole the previous election. He locked up and he tortured anyone trying to unseat him. And Juan Guaido, who according to his country's own constitution is now the rightful president of Venezuela. As tensions escalate, with socialist Maduro refusing to give up power, Maduro is ordering Venezuelan diplomats in the U.S. to return home to Venezuela immediately and declaring all American diplomats must leave Venezuela in the next 47 hours. And it gets worse. Tonight, as this rogue socialist dictator continues to lose his grip on power, he's running straight into the arms of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, who wants nothing more than to establish his presence in our hemisphere. Joining me right now, National Security Advisor John Bolton. Ambassador Bolton, welcome to the program.
Glad to be with you.
Wow, we got a lot going on there, right? In our own hemisphere, we have Vladimir Putin right now saying that he's on Maduro's side, extending his warm wishes to Maduro and offering his support. What does that mean for us, given that this is a country that's less than 3 hours from Miami by plane?
Well, it is. It's right in our backyard, and our recognition of a new constitutional interim president has been joined by over a dozen Latin American countries. One of the most remarkable things about what we're seeing here is that the free countries of this hemisphere are aligned against Maduro overwhelmingly. And so China, Russia, Cuba, Iran, these countries that are authoritarian themselves, I think are demonstrating to everybody that they're not on the side of the Venezuelan people.
I mean, the Venezuelan people have spoken. You have only to see what happened in the streets there with hundreds of thousands of people marching peacefully because they want a chance for freedom. They want a democracy. They want to be able to elect their leader and not have to live under this socialist, repressive, criminal regime. Tell me what Nicolas Maduro and Hugo Chavez did to the people of that country.
Well, they've impoverished Venezuela. We now have between 3 and 4 million refugees who have fled the country, unprecedented in the history of the Western Hemisphere. Maduro and Chavez before him systematically looted the oil resources of the country. There's been no capital investment. Income is declining. Literally, civil society is collapsing in Venezuela, which is why the stakes are so high here and why President Trump did extend recognition to the interim president and the National Assembly as the real constitutional authority. If we miss this chance, I think most observers think it could be a long time before the Venezuelan people are going to be free.
Yeah, and we've, missed these opportunities before, and Venezuela's missed the opportunity to be free because there was a time when Hugo Chavez was overthrown for a couple of days, but eventually the military sided with him. So let me ask you about where we are right now, because Nicolas Maduro allegedly has the support of his military. If he has the military, where does that leave President Guaido, the opposition, and assembly members who tell me many of them are worried about their own safety and their own lives right now because these are enemies, effectively, of Maduro's state?
Right. I don't think Maduro has the military. He has statements by his Minister of Defense, who owes his job to Maduro. I think the average service member is very much on the side of Juan Guaido, the interim president. I think the military is still up in the air. I think the fact they have stayed in their barracks these last 30 hours now shows that they're not necessarily, Maduro can't count on them to follow his orders. So there are extensive discussions going on by members of the National Assembly with the military. This is still very much in play, and it's one reason why today here in Washington we've been looking at ways to disconnect Maduro from the financial resources he needs to pay the military and otherwise keep himself in power. That could be a very effective way, we think, of helping the legitimate government.
How do you do that?
Well, there are a number of things we could do. You know, we have already informed the Federal Reserve that Guaido is the real interim president, the legitimate government, which means that all official Venezuelan financial assets in this country now belong to interim President Guaido. Maduro doesn't have control over it any longer. We're looking at the oil assets. That's the single most important income stream to the government of Venezuela. We're looking at what to do to that. We want everybody to know we're looking at all this very seriously. We don't want any American businesses or investors caught by surprise. They can see what President Trump did yesterday. We're following through on it.
So if you think of a company like Citgo, which is owned by PDVSA, which is the state-run oil company there in Venezuela, we have a lot of those Citgo assets right here in the U.S. Is that something, for example, sir, that you're looking at?
Yeah, well, we're in conversation with major American companies now that are either in Venezuela or, in the case of Citgo, here in the United States. I think we're trying to get to the same end result here. You know, Venezuela is one of the three countries I call the troika of tyranny. It'll make a big difference to the United States economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of Venezuela. It'd be good for the people of the United States. We both have a lot at stake here, making this come out the right way.
Yeah, no, it's tragic to see such a resource-rich country, which once enjoyed such a high standard of living, you know, for Latin America at least, now be in such a desperate state with 90% of the people now living in poverty. Let me ask you about the people we have on the ground there, some of our ambassadors, because Nicolas Maduro is telling them they got 72 hours as of yesterday to get out. That would mean everybody's got to be out by Saturday. If they are not out, if we have Americans, diplomats still on the ground, what might he do and what might we do?
Well, I can tell you President Trump, Vice President Pence, Secretary Pompeo, myself, all of us are deeply concerned about the safety of Americans in Venezuela, and we're taking a number of steps now to help ensure that safety. Don't want to get into the specifics, but we're working very hard on it. You know, Maduro, as you say, gave our diplomats 72 hours to get out. He doesn't have the authority to do that. He's not the legitimate president. The diplomats stayed in Venezuela last night. They'll stay there again tonight. We're going to monitor this on an hourly basis to make sure our people are safe. The other countries, the Lima Group countries, mostly Latin American countries that also recognize Guaido, have the same problem. We're all working together. We want to do what we can to show that Guaido is the legitimate government. We've presented our diplomatic credentials to him. But Maduro would make a severely critical mistake if he did anything, not just to our official Americans, but to the thousands of private American citizens in Venezuela as well.
He says he has intelligence, and humor me with this, that you, sir, have tried to assassinate him. I asked Delcy Rodriguez, the former vice president of Venezuela, about that, and she confirmed that the Russians effectively were giving him this information. What's your response to all that?
Well, you know, I enjoy fiction as much as the next person. That falls right in that category. Look, we're trying to do the right thing from the perspective of American national interest, the right thing from the perspective of the Venezuelan people. That's the course we're on. That's what we're after here.
Is there some kind of potential amnesty being worked out right now behind the scenes for Nicolas Maduro, and a promise to some military members that, no, we're not going to string you up on trial and throw you in jail for war crimes? I mean, how do you negotiate some kind of transfer of power right now?
Yeah, look, what we'd like would be the peaceful transfer of power of Maduro to say, I'm out of here, get on a plane, go to some other country, live in a nice villa on the beach for the rest of his life. The National Assembly has done a very wise thing down there. They've granted amnesty already to most military officers, captains, majors, people at that level who are living almost in poverty themselves. You know, we'll have to work it out with some of the top people, but if it would facilitate a peaceful transfer of power and people who have been responsible for repression left the country, you know, we could work with that. This is up to the people of Venezuela ultimately to decide how to handle this.
Well, it sounds like there's a lifeline for some of those dictators that need to move to the side and live happily ever after in their villa someplace other than Venezuela. Anyway, a very important story, and we're going to stay on it, and I appreciate you joining us here tonight.